Actually, I want to ask 3 questions. Are you ready? Because you're a good audience. The first question is, have you ever looked at anybody and thought they're past their sell-by date? A lot of honesty in the room, I love it. Okay, hands up if you have ever thought that you're past your sell-by date. Okay, hands up if you ignore all sell-by dates, even the ones on food. Okay, enough with that. I talk about generations, and I've decided that I'm going to own ageism from now on. So, what I want to do is to get 2 very glamorous and beautiful volunteers up here. No, I'm sorry, I know you're beautiful, but I've chosen them already. And they're going to help me to transmit my story about whether age really does matter, when we all know that the answer to that is no. But I'm just going to prove a point to you in 9 minutes as to how our age really doesn't matter, but actually the problem is how we perceive age, right? So I'd like Kat to come up here, and also I'd like Ian to come up here. I'd like you to give them a round of applause, our beautiful and glamorous assistants. Thank you. Thank you. If you'd like to stand here. If you'd like to stand here. Okay, and this box of tricks is very important because I need to give something to you, and I would like you to show the audience. And I would like to show the audience, thank you. What does it say? This says, I'm really young. And this says,
I'm really old.
Exactly. Because actually, although I talk about generational theory, and just to prove those in the room who want to know what research I've done, it's the Brunswick PR Global Research from 2017, and it's also Strauss and Howe Generational Theory. Nailed it. So, here's what I want to talk about. This is how we really perceive age. Either people are really young or they're really old. Let's just try this one out. Okay, so we are looking at somebody who's really young. And what do we think? Well, if I take my kids to school, I look at the teacher and go, that teacher looked about 12 years old. And why is it that we say 12 years? So that teacher looked about 12 years old, very young. Or we look at somebody and go, you're a policeman? Really? You look like you've only just come out of school. Okay, now let's do the other thing. Look at really old people and you think, why aren't you dead? You're my boss. How can you be my boss? You're so old. How do you get up in the morning? Or worse still, obviously you don't have sex anymore. Come on, that's what we do. That's the whole point about age. It isn't really about generational theory, although I can give that to you. And if I have a keynote, I do give that to you. But actually, I just want today for you to recognize that we perceive age in a weird way. How young is young? That's for you to decide. How old is old? That's for you to decide. But let's just try and give you a bit more flavor about why we perceive things in a different way. More toys. Taking this from you, Barnaby. This is what Barnaby Winter taught me. Okay, now this is for you. And she's looking at that going, what? And this is for you. Okay, so let's start with the really old. What are we holding here?
I think this might be a Rolodex filing system.
It's a database. Come on, it's a database. We used to write things down and we used to file them, and computers were really enormous and took up whole rooms. An older person, wherever old is for you, would know how to do 3 things. How to store lots of paper, how to write on lots of paper, and how to communicate face to face and on the telephone. Even if I'm older and I've appropriated email, WhatsApp, Instagram, all of the others, I'm going to be good at it, because older people, wherever old is for you, are good at communicating. Now, if we go to our very young person here, what are you holding?
Does it make telephone calls?
It does. This is a smartphone. What does a smartphone do?
Smart things.
Very good. It does everything. It does everything. So if you think about somebody who 20, 30, 40 years ago was in the workplace, they knew how to write stuff down and they knew how to communicate. If you think about somebody who's very young, wherever young is for you, they do everything on their smartphone. Imagine this very old person in their car and they get lost. And they can go on their sat-nav, but also, what else might they do? Read a map. Read a map, exactly. But if we go to somebody who's very young in their car, of course, if they get lost, they can read a sat-nav, but what else will they do? Check the phone. The statistics show that the people who get lost in all of those mountains and places are young people trying to use the sat-nav or the GPS on their smartphones. So that's really the difference between younger and older people. That's the trouble that we have. And actually there is something about sort of the middle ground where maybe I am. Yeah. The middle ground is you get to a certain age and things happen. Let's give you some examples. Okay, let's imagine, you've got good imagination, let's imagine that I'm 40 years old. And suddenly, shut up. And suddenly, I go to Marks and Spencer and I think, God, the clothes look good. Yeah. There's another thing I do. I get down at 40 years old, 45 years old, and then I think, God, it's actually quite hard to get up. You decide about age. First of all, what I'd like to do before I carry on is to ask my beautiful and glamorous assistants to put down their objects and go back to their seats. Round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very much. Aren't they beautiful? Especially our youngster. No idea. I think that one could say that very, very young people are like that. Really, there's a couple of things that I want to share with you about age, and that is, first of all, that it's perception. You are only as young as you think you are. You are only as old as you think you are. The trouble is that media positions us, doesn't it? There's lots of talk about generational theories such as millennials, Generation Z, Alpha. Let's just put that to one side for now and think about you. How old do you feel? If you feel like Tinkerbell or Peter Pan, you go play. And if, like some of my clients who are very young but have had a very hard life, if you feel like somebody who is a professor and very serious and really should be in robes and judging other people, then that's you as well. There's only really one thing that I want you to get, and that is that ageism is the silent ism that no one ever talks about and that everybody thinks doesn't exist because we have laws to protect it. So I'm going to share some stuff with you. The first one is this. Did you know that all the management consultants, PwC, Deloitte, Bain, Boston, all of the big names of management consulting, you've probably heard of some of them, you might even have worked with some of them, they have all of their contracts that say as soon as their people get to 60, they have to retire. Did you know that? It's legal. I'm not sure it's ethical. At the other end, we have people who are not allowed to go into a job because they're considered too young. But what is too young? And one of the biggest challenges for ageism is that we appear to have laws that protect us, but actually what people can do is just decide, I'm not going to deal with that anymore, I'm not going to have that person because they're too young, I'm not going to have that person because they're too old. So there are a few things that we can do. We can take off all the names and photographs, we can take off the background of all our CVs, but actually I want to leave you with this, because I'm going to stop briefly and try not even to get to my 10 minutes. I want to leave you with one thing, which is, what would you do personally to reduce ageism, whether it's too young or too old, in your workplace, in your business, in your life? What would you do? Would you give somebody a chance to do something? Would you offer them a job when you weren't sure if they were ready? What's your truth? Of course you bloody wouldn't. But here's what you could do. I would like to reinvent the project. You know what projects are, don't you? They have a beginning, a middle and an end. And anybody who's really young, up this end, anybody who's really young does projects because they've done those at school. So I would reinvent projects for the workplace and say, what we could do is put different generations together on projects. We could have a younger person with an older person co-leading. And everything that we do in our life, we should encourage younger people to work with older people. And actually then, do you know what we'd have? Just a dream team. Thank you very much.